I mean, it makes me very, very angry, this. It's gone into... The only thing going into remission here, unfortunately, is our cancer survival, which is a real, real shame. What do you put this down to? Do you think this is the knock-on effect, maybe, of some of the hold-ups that we saw during the pandemic?
I think, in all honesty, it's a real confluence of, some really challenging circumstances. We've known for a long time that there are workforce challenges within the NHS for sort of around 10 years. And obviously the impact of COVID on the workforce and the ability to treat cancer and diagnose cancer at the same time as COVID means that we've now got a sort of a real challenge on our hands. We know that for leukemia patients, for example, that leukemia is actually emergency presentation is a key way that leukemia is already diagnosed in the NHS, which is not good, because we know that if you're diagnosed in an emergency presentation situation, then you have a less chance of surviving. And we know that a recent report by the All-Party Parliamentary Group highlighted that this has got worse in the pandemic. So we know that both for leukemia and other cancers, early diagnosis is absolutely critical. It's a cornerstone of past cancer strategies and future cancer strategies. So we know that it's critical that we've got to tackle it. But unfortunately, it is a number of things that have driven it, and we now need a long-term approach which tackles all of the drivers of the problem, really. And you talked about awareness. Awareness is one. Awareness amongst the public is really critical. We know that awareness of leukemia, for example, is very low amongst the public and GPs. So we're calling for greater awareness campaigns and programmes on all cancers, including leukemia and blood cancer. We also need to think about how the public access early diagnosis. We need to think about how we innovate sort of early diagnosis systems within NHS. For example, we know that for cancers where the symptoms are less obvious, that having pathways where patients could self-refer and to rapid diagnostic centres could be a real opportunity to improve the effectiveness of early diagnosis. And we also need to make sure that the government, who are currently focusing on a new 10-year cancer plan, that they absolutely think about how they focus early diagnosis of not just the common cancers and the stageable cancers, i.e. those with tumours, but also the less survivable ones and those with which are non-staged, like leukemia, and are less obvious to spot.
Well, absolutely. And I can't move away really from, our reaction at the start of the pandemic, where I understand that, initially the health service, the National Health Service, had to be almost like a COVID recovery service or dealing with COVID service. But we did create a situation where a lot of people were being diagnosed, in some cases misdiagnosed, over things like FaceTime. Getting face-to-face GP appointments was down. There's reports here saying that around 740,000 missing referrals for patients suspected of having cancer between March 2020 and September 2021. We've got an NHS waiting list now of something like 5-6 million people. Surely things like the lockdowns and the way that we went about that and closing GP surgeries has had an impact on this. For the lack of face-to-face appointments, surely.
I think that certainly COVID has had an impact on every health system across the world, not just the UK. And actually many health systems are now dealing with the same challenge. I think that same system also saved a lot of lives. And actually there is some evidence to show that some of the new processes and systems that were put in place, like diagnosing via sort of video calls, was actually really effective in continuing to be able to diagnose people with cancer and other diseases. And I think, to be honest, the NHS needs to be applauded for what they've managed to be able to do in COVID and in lockdown. But the challenge now is, what is the strategy for the next 10 years? And how do we take a long-term approach to workforce planning, but also the early diagnosis of cancer? And also, how do we learn from the innovations that were made, both in research and within the NHS over lockdown? Because there have been some great innovations that we now need to take forward.
Absolutely. Fiona, just before it's a bit short and sweet this, so apologies for getting squeezed by the news somewhat, but Could you tell our viewers and our listeners and our online viewers maybe just what some of the symptoms of leukemia are? Because I think that's quite important. We are talking about it. We might as well try and raise a bit of awareness about it, you know?
Yes, I think one of the problems with leukemia and blood cancer is that they're often hard to spot, and so symptoms like fatigue, symptoms like a fever are common symptoms of leukemia and blood cancer. I think that what I would say is that with cancer, often what you find is you know that something's wrong, you know there's some symptoms, but you're not sure what they are. And our advice for those with suspected leukemia or other blood cancers or other cancer is, if in doubt, go to your GP and say that there's symptoms that are not going away. You can look on the NHS website and you can look on our website for the full signs and symptoms of leukemia and the different types of blood cancer.
Well, thank you